The morning they came for the house, the temperature hung at 12 degrees, and the sky looked like a nickel left too long in the rain. I was standing at the kitchen sink in my wool socks, rinsing out the same navy mug Grandpa Elias had used every morning for 40 years, when the white Escalade eased to the curb like a shark cutting water. Two people climbed out. Marjorie Voss stepped down first, mid-50s, blonde hair lacquered into a perfect helmet, camel hair coat open just enough to flash the pearls that probably cost more than my first duty station paycheck. Harlan Drake followed, clipboard clutched like body armor, the Willow Creek Estates HOA crest stitched on his navy polo peeking out beneath a Patagonia vest that screamed Northern Virginia money. They marched up my driveway the way federal agents march up to a warrant service, shoulders squared, chins high, certain they owned the ground they walked on. Marjorie didn't knock. She hammered. I opened the door a deliberate 8 inches, enough to see them, not enough to invite them in. The January air rushed past me like it was trying to escape. You have 72 hours to vacate this property, Marjorie announced, voice sharp enough to etch glass. She thrust a thick envelope at me, the Homeowners Association seal embossed in gold foil like it carried the weight of the Magna Carta. The board has voted. This is official. Harlan adjusted his tortoiseshell glasses and offered the kind of smirk men where when they believe the fight is already over and they're just waiting for you to realize it. They saw what they wanted to see. A 54-year-old retired lieutenant colonel in a faded Carhartt jacket and Levi's that had seen better decades, gray creeping in at the temples, standing in the doorway of a 1973 ranch house whose aluminum siding had faded to the color of weak coffee. They saw a man who'd buried his wife 4 years earlier after a 2-year war with pancreatic cancer, who'd missed his grandfather's funeral because he was in Kandahar when the call came, who still had hospital bills stacked on the desk and an empty chair at the kitchen table that no amount of time would ever fill again. They figured I was tired, broke, grieving, and alone. They were half right. What they didn't see was 6 years as a JAG officer, 6 years learning how to take apart corrupt systems, one violated regulation, one forged signature, one lie at a time. I took the envelope without a word, let the silence stretch until Marjorie's smile began to crack at the edges, then closed the door with the soft finality of a judge's gavel. I leaned my back against it for a long minute, listening to their footsteps retreat, her heels clicking like a metronome counting down to 0, his loafers scuffing because he couldn't quite keep up. Only when the Escalade pulled away did I open the envelope. 9 pages. Legalese thick as winter fog. Violations I'd never committed, fines I didn't owe, interest compounding daily at 12%, and a final demand. Vacate within 72 hours or face forcible removal and lien sale of the only piece of Elias Dawson I had left on this earth. I read it twice at the kitchen table, the same scarred oak table where Grandpa taught me to play gin rummy and where he carved VH. Plus ED. The summer I was 10. Then I poured a fresh cup of coffee strong enough to float a horseshoe, opened my laptop, and went to war. First stop, my bank portal. 24 consecutive HOA payments, automatic draft, cleared the same day every month. Not one late. Not one bounced. Second stop, Fairfax County land records and the official HOA bylaws on file. Section 8.4 was crystal clear. Any alleged violation required written notice, a 30-day cure period, and a hearing before the full board before a single dollar in fines could be assessed. Marjorie had skipped every safeguard and gone straight for the throat. That wasn't incompetence. That was a blitzkrieg. I photographed every page of the notice, every bank statement, every confirmation email from the bank. By 2 a.m., I had 3 color-coded folders on my desktop, financial proof, procedural violations, and a brand new one labeled harassment, because the anonymous text that arrived at 1:47 a.m., showing a nighttime photo of the house with the words "Time to Sell" in dripping red capitals definitely qualified. I slept 3 hours, woke before dawn, shaved because JAG officers shave even when the world is on fire, and drove to the county clerk's office the minute they unlocked the doors. The lobby smelled like burnt coffee and old paper. I slid my request forms across the counter like I was filing charges. 3 to 5 business days, the clerk said, not even looking up. Fine. I already had enough from the public portal to keep me busy for weeks. Edith Langford lived 3 streets over in a brick rambler with whiskey barrel planters exploding with burgundy mums. She'd been on the HOA board back when it was still neighbors arguing over who was bringing the potato salad to the 4th of July picnic. She answered the door in gardening gloves and a William and Mary sweatshirt, silver hair pulled back in a bun that had probably looked the same since 1985. Victor Hale, I said. Elias Dawson's grandson. Her eyes softened instantly. Lord, you look just like him when he was young. Come in, honey. She poured coffee without asking and sat me down at a table covered with seed catalogs. I laid the notice in front of her like a dead rat. Edith read it slowly, lips pressing thinner with every page. Marjorie Voss, she said finally, the name tasting like spoiled milk. Moved here from Loudoun County 5 years ago talking about professionalizing the HOA. Got herself elected president in a meeting 12 people showed up to. Rewrote the bylaws the next year, so the president can pretty much do whatever she wants as long as she has 2 yes men on the board. Harlan Drake and that weasel Douglas Kane, the lawyer, are her trained seals. Edith leaned in, voice dropping. 3 families gone in 24 months, Vic. All long-timers like your grandpa. All got hit with violations that came out of nowhere. Paint color suddenly wrong after 20 years, mailbox too tall by half an inch, One poor woman got fined because her Christmas lights were up 3 days past January 6th. They fought for a while, then the fines got insane, and they sold. Every house was bulldozed within 6 months and replaced with a 6-bedroom wedding cake. And every single one of those houses is now owned by an LLC that traces back to Marjorie or one of her inner circle. She slid a plain manila folder across the table. Copies of emails I saved from when I was still on the board. You didn't get these from me. I took the folder like it was a live grenade. Back home, I traced Voss Holdings LLC, then Summit Property Advisors, then Meridian Real Estate Trust, then a daisy chain of shell companies that all looped back to Marjorie's social security number, her sister's maiden name, or Harlan's wife's dental practice. Classic money laundering architecture dressed up in real estate clothing. By the end of the week, I had a spreadsheet that would give an IRS auditor palpitations. 15 aggressive enforcement actions in 3 years, 9 forced sales, 6 purchases by entities controlled by Marjorie or Harlan. Over $112,000 in HOA liens paid not to the association treasury, but straight into Marjorie's personal accounts through a company called Meridian Property Solutions. That wasn't sloppy bookkeeping. That was organized crime wearing khakis and a smile. The pressure campaign shifted into overdrive. Day 5. A second notice slid under my door at 4:12 a.m. 24 hours to comply, fees now tripled with administrative surcharges. Day 6. I came out to find eyesore spray painted across my garage door in dripping red, the paint still wet enough to smell. Day 7. The neighborhood Facebook page lit up with posts calling me everything from a hoarder to a public menace. Half the accounts had been created that week, profile pictures stolen from stock photos. Day 8. A certified letter from a realtor I'd never met offering cash, 22% above market, close in 10 days, to help you avoid the stress and expense of further legal action. Same realtor who handled every teardown sale on Maple Court and Elm Street. Day 9. My trash cans were dumped in the street and the lid stolen. Juvenile, but the message was clear. Day 10. Someone unscrewed every exterior light bulb on the house and smashed them in the driveway. I swept up the glass at dawn, bagged it as evidence, and added it to the file. Each escalation was designed to isolate, exhaust, and terrify. Each escalation created another piece of evidence I photographed, time-stamped, and filed. I slept with the growing binder next to my bed like a loaded shotgun. On day 11, I found the kill shot buried in a 2021 closing statement for a house on Maple Court. The owner, Gloria Delgado, widow, retired schoolteacher, had cracked under $38,000 in bogus fines and sold for $410,000. The HOA lien was satisfied at closing with a $28,000 payment, not to the association's operating account, but directly to Meridian Property Solutions, LLC. Sole member and manager, Marjorie and Voss. For more transactions followed the exact same pattern. Total diverted, $112,400 and change. I sat back from the laptop and felt the kind of calm that settles over you right before you kick in a door on a warrant service. The emergency board meeting was announced with 46 hours notice, another blatant bylaw violation. The community center smelled like burnt popcorn and old floor wax. The room was standing room only. Marjorie took the head table like she was about to accept an Oscar, navy blazer crisp, pearls glowing under the fluorescence. Harlan sat to her right looking like a man who'd rather be getting a root canal. The lawyer, Douglas Kane, sat to her left billing by the quarter hour and sweating through his Brooks Brothers shirt. Marjorie opened with a 10-minute soliloquy about community standards, rising property values, and the unfortunate necessity of enforcing rules against those who refuse to comply. She never said my name, but every soul in the room knew who the villain was in her passion play. When she finished, Kane moved to adjourn. I stood. Point of order, I said, voice carrying without effort. Classroom voice, courtroom voice, the voice that used to make captains sweat. Section 4.12 of the bylaws requires any member subject to enforcement action be given opportunity to speak when the action is discussed. This entire meeting was called because of my case. I have the floor. You could have heard a pin drop on shag carpet. Marjorie tried to stare me down the way she'd stared down widows and retirees for 5 years. I stared back the way I used to stare down colonels who thought rank could paper over fraud. She looked away first. I walked to the front carrying a 3-inch binder and a USB drive. I didn't raise my voice once. I started with the simple stuff. Bank records proving every dues payment made on time for 2 straight years. Bylaws requiring 30-day notice that were never given. The complete absence of any prior written warning before they tried to throw me out of my own house. Then I moved to the money. I projected the documents on the screen behind me. LLC ownership filings, closing statements, bank routing numbers. I walked them through the 5 diverted liens, side by side with the HOA financials that showed no corresponding income. I finished with the emails Edith had saved, Marjorie to Harlan, timestamped 2 years earlier, identifying redevelopment candidates and estimating profit margins per property. The room detonated. Gloria Delgado stood first, 71 years old, voice trembling with 5 years of bottled rage. That was my house on Maple Court. You find me for a cracked driveway that passed inspection the year before. I paid $24,000 to make it go away because I was terrified of losing everything. That money went to you. Tom Whitaker, 78, former Marine, stood so fast his metal chair clattered backward. You threatened to lean my late wife's medical alert button if I didn't paint the house a color you approved. I'm 90% disabled. Where the hell did that money go, Marjorie? The questions came like incoming artillery. The lawyer tried to gavel for order with a plastic water bottle. It didn't help. Marjorie went ghost white, then flushed crimson, then white again. She looked like a woman watching her carefully constructed empire burn in real time. 3 days later, every board member resigned, citing personal reasons in emails that all sounded like they'd been written by the same terrified lawyer. Kane sent a letter advising them to distance themselves from potential criminal liability. Translation: every man for himself. The county prosecutor called me personally on a Tuesday morning. A week later, Marjorie Voss was arrested in her circular driveway on her way to Pilates, still wearing Lululemon and pearls, hands cuffed behind her back, while the neighbors she'd terrorized for 5 years watched from their front windows and didn't bother to hide their smiles. The charges read like a prosecutor's dream: 5 counts of embezzlement, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and a half-dozen related offenses. Harlan and 2 other board members were indicted as co-conspirators. Total theft across 5 years, $214,000 and change. The trial lasted 11 months. I spent 3 full days on the stand walking a jury of my peers through spreadsheets most CPAs would need a week to decipher. Marjorie's defense attorney, a man whose tie probably cost more than my monthly mortgage, tried to paint me as a bitter veteran with a vendetta. The jury took 4 hours to convict on every single count. Sentencing day, the courtroom was packed with people she'd bullied, bankrupted, and driven from their homes. The judge was a woman who'd grown up 2 miles from Willow Creek and still had shrapnel scars on her conscience from watching good people get chewed up by bad ones. She looked Marjorie in the eye and gave her 54 months in federal prison, plus full restitution, $580,000 in penalties and damages, and a permanent bar from ever serving on any HOA board in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Harlan drew 22 months and permanent disbarment from practicing law in Virginia. The others took pleas and probation in exchange for testimony that buried Marjorie deeper. Her properties, including every house she'd stolen from widows and retirees, were seized to pay restitution. The Maple Court families filed civil suits that sailed through on the strength of the criminal convictions. Some of them even got their old houses back when the LLCs collapsed. New bylaws written on transparency and common sense. Every dime tracked in real time online. Every meeting streamed and archived. Any expenditure over $1,000 requiring a public vote with advance notice. They tore out Marjorie's marble fountain in the clubhouse and turned it into a community vegetable garden. There's a little brass plaque there now that reads, "In memory of those who stood up when it was hard." 2 years later, I still live in Grandpa Elias's house. I replaced the roof with architectural shingles the color he always wanted, painted the trim the same soft gray he picked in 1973, and planted a new pin oak out front because the old one finally gave up after 51 years of holding up the sky. Some evenings Edith Langford comes by with a peach pie, and we sit on the porch drinking coffee strong enough to float a horseshoe, watching kids ride bikes down a street that finally feels like a neighborhood again. The new board president is Gloria Delgado. She won in a landslide, and the reserve fund is healthier than it's been in 20 years. Every time I walk past the mantle photo of Grandpa holding those keys in 1973, grinning like he'd just won the world, I think the same thing. He was right. Some things are solid. Some things nobody can take away. Not if you're willing to stand in the doorway and fight for them with the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you God. Now I want to hear from you. When did someone with a title and a clipboard decide your home, your peace, your life was just an inconvenience to their plans? Did you swallow the injustice? Or did you stand your ground? Where was the moment you said no more? Drop your story in the comments. No polish, no filter. I read every single one, and the ones that still burn with that righteous fire might just end up in the next fight we tell together. Because injustice feels like violence even when nobody lays a hand on you. And the only antidote is people willing to stand up, document everything, and refuse to blink. Your turn.